All right. Now, today I want to talk about the best shooters in NBA history. These are the best. It's not really about stats. It's more of how your form looks, how pretty your form looks, the artistry, how sweet your form looks, how graceful it looks. Um, Not like Steph Curry just throws the ball in the hoop. I'm not gonna lie. Steph Curry has like 90,000% for the 3 point line. I get it, okay, but this list is more about how pretty your form looks, picture perfect jump shot, in my opinion. So if you got an ugly form, but the ball goes in, kind of like a Sean Marion, I didn't put your name on the list. Or Dell Curry, Steph Curry. I didn't put his name. I didn't put his name on the list. But here we go. Number 10, I got Dell Ellis. Dell Ellis was an amazing shooter, quiet guy, quiet assassin. His career really didn't take off until we got to Seattle, um, back in the late '80s, early '90s. Played with Milwaukee, played with a whole lot of teams, the Spurs, but his jumper was wet, man. Um, but he was the big time scorer with the Sonics. You know, he was averaging like 29 points, 28 points a game. He was making the All Star team every year. He just had a sweet form, quiet assassin. Number 10, Dell Ellis. Number 9, I got a tie between Craig Hodges and Jeff Malone. Hodges' jumper was unbelievable. His jumper was wet, man. He didn't get that much playing time. You know, seemed like he didn't get that much playing time, especially with the Chicago Bulls in the early '90s. But when he was in the game, the dude was on fire, and he was a clutch shooter too. Hit a lot of big shots in the playoffs. Um, 3-time 3 point champion of all time. He had a pretty form on his jumper, nice foot placement. And then we got Jeff Malone. Jeff Malone jumper was wet, man. Seemed like he always shot a fadeaway. Seemed like he was always falling away or fading away when he was shooting. He had a funny form, man, but it was a nice form, a pure form, and his shot seemed to always go in, man. Um, but he was a big time scorer too. You know, he was averaging like 25 points a game, 27, making the All Star team here and there in the early '90s, late '80s. So Jeff Malone used to play with the Washington Bullets back in the day, tied with Craig Hodges at number 9. Number 8, don't laugh. I got Michael Jordan, number 8. Yo, Michael Jordan jumper was wet, man. Especially from the mid-range game. He had a nice mid-range game, excellent mid-range game. Underrated 3 point shooter. Michael Jordan was an underrated 3 point shooter. Had a nice form, pretty form. One of the players in NBA history, Michael Jordan. What more can you say? He was actually in the 3 point contest. I believe it was 1990 in Miami. He did terrible, but Michael Jordan, man, underrated 3 point shooter too. Just go watch the 1992 Game One Finals versus Portland. The dude was on fire, man. He hit like 6 3 pointers in the first half. I watched the game live. One of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. He finished with 35. He was 35. He scored 35 points in the first half. Go watch that game. Michael Jordan at number 8. Number 7, I got Jerry Seasting. I tied him Jerry Seasting, and I tied him with Drazen Petrovic. Jerry Seasting, Indiana born, Indiana bred. He's one of those guys that, as a kid, shot 10 hours a day in his driveway in Indiana. Went to Purdue. Jerry Seasting, he played with the Boston Celtics, the great Boston Celtic teams of the mid 80s, late 80s. Jerry Seasting jumper was wet, man. For mid range, his mid range game was deadly. Jerry Seasting, I got him at number 7, and I got him tied with Drazen Petrovic. Drazen Petrovic was an amazing shooter. Um, his career, he was a legend in Yugoslavia, Croatia, and when he got to the NBA, he started out with the Portland Trailblazers. He was on a Portland Trailblazer team, the 1990 Portland Trailblazer team that made the finals against the Detroit Pistons. He was kind of a role player, like a backup player. He didn't get that much playing time. So he got traded to the New Jersey Nets, and that's when his career took off. In my opinion, the golden era of the Nets. None of this BS Brooklyn Nets stuff. The golden age of the Nets. You heard me. Early 90 Nets when they had Chris Morris, Derek Coleman, the kid from Queens, Kenny Anderson. That team. That's the golden age of the New Jersey, the Brooklyn Nets. I don't give a damn what anybody says. The New Jersey Nets. That's the golden age of the Nets. Early 90 Nets. But Jordan Petrovic was on that team. His three-pointer was deadly. Mid-range game was on point. Pretty sweet for him. Drazen Petrovic tied with Jerry Sichting at number 7. Number 6, I got Jeff Hornacek tied with J.J. Redick. Man, Jeff Hornacek jumper was wet, man. Especially in that corner. Seemed like every time I seen Jeff Hornacek, he was shooting in the corner. Either the left corner or the right corner. And he was automatic from that corner, man. His had a pretty form too. Pretty form. Mechanics were on point. Jumper was crucial. He got traded for Charles Barkley. Remember back in 1992. But his career, I feel like his career didn't take off until he got to Phoenix. And then he got traded to Philadelphia. He played with the 76ers for a couple of years. Big time scorer with the 76ers, by the way. He was averaging like 25 points a game. But excellent shooter. He got his number retired by the Utah Jazz, Jeff Hornacek. And then we got J.J. Redick. Went to Duke. I got J.J. Redick tied at with number 6. Hold on. I'm going to put this charger in the laptop before. Okay, sorry about that. Laptop was powering down, so I had to get the charger. Okay, where was I? Okay, we were yeah, I got JJ Redick at number 6, tied with Jeff Hornacek, man. JJ Redick jumper was wet. Awesome fundamentals. You know, he grew up in Virginia. He was one of them country boys that shot like 12 hours a day, 10 hours a day. His mechanics were on point. Excellent mechanics, man. I got to see him play in person when he was playing with the Clippers. The dude put on a show, man. The dude was on fire. I think he scored like 29 points. This was about 3 years ago, a couple years ago, when he was playing with the Clippers. I took the Greyhound bus down there, and I got to see him play. That's when the Clippers were pretty good. That's when they had Chris Paul, Jamal Crawford, all those guys, Lou Williams. But was Lou Williams on that team? I don't think Lou Williams was on that team. But anyways, I got to see JJ Redick play in person, and he was on fire. So that's what made me put him on the list. JJ Redick. So I got JJ Redick tied at number 6 with Jeff Hornacek. But like I said, JJ Redick, man, I was really surprised about the. I didn't think he was going to be that good of an NBA player. I'm not going to lie. But with hard work and discipline, he made himself into a good NBA player. I'm not going to lie. I didn't think he was going to be that good in the NBA, but he really surprised me, and something to be proud of. He has something to be proud of because he turned himself into an excellent NBA player. Number 5, I got Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge was deadly. He was one of the better 3-point shooters back in the late 80s, early 90s. He was deadly from 3-point range. He had a nice mid-range game. His form was sweet, picture perfect jumper. He could just mark it down when he was open. Played on the great teams with the Celtics mid 80s. Made the All-Star team one time, I believe, in 88. So Danny Ainge. I actually got Danny Ainge tied with Chris Mullin. Chris Mullin, left-handed jumper, sweet form, one of the better left-handed shooters in his day in the early 90s, late 80s. He was one of the better players in the NBA in the early 90s, late 80s. Big time scorer too. He's averaged like 27, making the All-Star team every year. Underrated NBA player. Probably one of the most underrated NBA players in NBA history. Chris Mullin, sweet form, automatic, nice mid-range game, big time scorer. One of the better NBA players in the early 90s. Chris Mullin. He was on the first Dream Team. Chris Mullin tied with Danny Ainge for number 5. Number 4, I got Larry Bird. Larry Legend. Got Larry Bird, number 4. Shot the ball very high, but he had a pretty form. Had a nice 3-point jumper. Had the beautifulest fall away I've ever seen in my life. The prettiest fadeaway I've ever seen in my life. I mean, go watch Larry Bird's fadeaway jumper. He is the best fadeaway probably in the NBA history. One of the best free throw shooters in NBA history, too. Larry Bird, Larry Legend, one of the best NBA players of all time. Larry Bird. What more can you say about Larry Bird? So I got him at number 4. Number 3, Steve Kerr. I got Steve Kerr, the third best shooter of all time. Steve Kerr, in my opinion. Steve Kerr's career was built off of obscurity. He was a late bloomer. Everybody knew he could shoot when he was at University of Arizona. He got drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Everybody knew he could shoot with the Cavaliers. Then he got traded to the Orlando Magic. Everybody knew he was a good shooter. He was a good shooter in practice. But his confidence didn't start taking off until he got traded to the Chicago Bulls. Until he signed with the Chicago Bulls in 1994. That's when his career took off. Steve Kerr's career took off. He developed confidence. And when he's, him playing against Mark Price in practice every day, when he came up with the Cleveland Cavaliers, that's what made him a better player and a better shooter. Had a nice off the dribble jump shot with Steve Kerr. Had a beautiful form, nice foot placement on his jumper. Excellent form, Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr, number 3. Number 2, I got Mark Price. Cold killer Mark Price, man. Jumper was wet. Sweet as ice cream. Had the choir boy haircut, part right here. He looked like a choir boy, but dude was a killer. Mark Price, one of the better point guards in the NBA. One of the better players, period. In the early 90s, late 80s. He was one of those players that made the All-Star team every year. Mark Price, I hated Mark Price when I was a kid. I ain't gonna lie. When there's somebody that's so good at something that you hate them for no reason, just because they're good at something. As a kid, I hated Mark Price because I was a Chicago Bulls fan. He was so good, I hated him. But mad respect to Mark Price. You had to give him mad respect, though, back then, man. Had a beautiful form, sweet jumper, nice form. Mark Price, one of the best free throw shooters in NBA history. He was on a second Dream Team. What more can you say about Mark Price? Number 2. Number 1. Now, this is controversial. Number 1, the best shooter in NBA history, in my opinion. Okay. Steph Curry, no. I get it. He's shooting 90,000% from 3-point range. I get it, okay? But his form is ugly. That's why his name is not on the list, okay? Steph Curry's a flat-footed jumper. He just throws the ball in. I know it goes in most of the time, but his jumper, he doesn't have a pretty form. That's why I didn't put him on the list. But number one, in my opinion, is John Paxson. That's right. Johnny Pack, the Pax man. John Paxson, I got him at number one. I swear to God, I never seen John Paxson miss a mid-range jumper in my life. That white boy can shoot, man. I ain't gonna lie, man. Johnny Paxson, his jumper was money, man. But when it came to playoff time, that dude was clutch. John Paxson's jumper was wet. That dude that white boy can shoot, man. I ain't gonna lie, man. That is the best shooter I've ever seen in my life, in my opinion. This is not about stats now. Okay, I get it. Steph Curry shooting 90,000%. I get it. Okay, I get it, man. This is about my opinion from what I've seen growing up. John Paxson. Go watch the fourth quarter of the 1991 Finals against the Lakers, Game 5. Go watch that fourth quarter. If you want to teach your kids how to shoot, go watch tape of John Paxson. That's a pure shooter right there. Okay? John Paxson. It's funny. John Paxson came out with the San Antonio Spurs. But his confidence, he didn't start gaining confidence till we got the Chicago Bulls. And his career took off like 1990, I want to say 91. That's when his career started taking off. But John Paxson made the greatest jumper in NBA history, in Chicago Bulls history, probably in NBA history. Game 6 in 1993 NBA Finals against the Suns. The most important shot in Chicago Bulls history. I don't give a damn what anybody says. They still talk about it to this day in Chicago. In Phoenix, they talk about it too. And I know the Phoenix Suns fans growing up in 93 remember the shot. But John Paxson, the best shooter I've ever seen in my life. Now I know there's a lot of players I left on the list. I grew up in the 70s. Now I've heard stories about Rick Mount, who went to Purdue, had a long career in the ABA. Now, I've heard stories about Rick Mount. Rick Mount shot tirelessly outside. He was another one of those Indiana boys that shot 20 hours a day. But I've heard stories that he would pay kids. He would line up kids in his neighborhood and pay them like dimes and nickels just to chase down his balls when he was shooting outside. He'll give him 10 cents here, 50 cents there, just to have kids catch his balls. So that he'll pay kids to do that in this neighborhood, man. That actually sounds like a good idea. I'm thinking about doing that, man. But I got John Paxson, the best shooter of all time. I know a lot of people are not going to agree with this list, but that's just my opinion. I mean, I've watched basketball religiously, and so there's a lot of players I probably left off. Guys like who's a real good shooter? Byron Scott. Hell, Bill Laimbeer. Shit, Bill Laimbeer, man. He was a decent shooter, especially from 3-point range, man. But I know there's a lot of players in the NBA now that I probably should have put on the list. But maybe in the future, maybe after I see them play a while, then I'll put them on the list. But I'm not gonna lie, as a kid, I watched basketball. For some reason, I watched it more in the early 90s. Maybe because I was a kid, I took the game personal. When you take things personal, you're more involved in it. So that's my list, and I'm going to stick to it. This is Brian C. Thank you.